G'day everyone, and welcome to the third and final video of week 1 in our legal ethics course. In this video we're going to look at the road ahead. Over the next 12 or 13 weeks, what materials are we going to cover? What's the pathway that'll get us to the point where you can say that you have completed this Priestley 11 requirement? This subject follows an active learning model. The key learning materials are delivered through these videos each week. I suggest that watching the videos should be the first thing that you do each and every week. Each week we'll also have a 2-hour workshop. In those workshops I'm going to present a series of animated scenarios based on the ethics that we're looking at each week. These are meant to generate discussion and debate because they're not easy questions that we're dealing with. Third, we're going to have a 1-hour synth session which is intended to be something like an old school tutorial, where you have the opportunity to use me as a resource to add to the knowledge that you've developed through the videos, through your reading, and through the workshops. You'll also find that for most weeks I'll produce 2-minute case notes where I boil key cases down into just 2 minutes. These are absolutely not a substitute for doing the reading yourself, but they'll help give you an overview so that you know what you're reading for. This week, week 1, is obviously an introductory week with 3 videos. One that looks at the idea of a profession and the connection between a profession and the concept of ethics. A second video which looks at the idea of ethics and how ethics differ from rules. And a third video, this video, that gives you an overview of the course. In week 2, we're looking at formal rules that establish our ethical frameworks as a lawyer and the institutions that implement those rules. So in the first video, we'll look at the Legal Profession Act. In the second, we'll look at the Australian Solicitors Conduct Rules. In the third video, we'll look at the Bar Association rules and the rules of court. And then in the fourth video for week 2, we look at the Legal Services Commission and also at the Queensland Law Society's Ethics Centre. The third week of our course, the topic is admission. This is a topic which is likely to be becoming very close to your hearts as you come towards the end of your studies. Ethics is at the heart of the admission process. In the first video, we look at the fundamental requirements for admission in Queensland, including the requirement to be a fit and proper person. In the second video, we look at the admission process itself, which is surprisingly complicated compared to what many people expect. In the third video, we focus on obstacles to admission, whether they can be overcome and how they can be overcome. Finally, in the fourth video, we stretch a little past admission and look at the issue of practicing certificates and the ongoing obligation of professional development that comes along with that certificate. With those first 3 weeks out of the way, we start to get stuck into the actual ethical rules, using the Solicitors' Conduct Rules as our central structure. So in week 4, we focus on our fundamental duty as lawyers, that is, our duty to the court. The video looks at that duty and how it prevails over every other duty. Then we look at a couple of specifics. In the second video, we look at the duty of candour to the court. And in the third video, we look at the concept of an undertaking, which is a special type of promise that you can make to the court or to your opponent on your honour as a practitioner, with consequences if you don't follow through. In weeks 5, 6 and 7, we look at the relationship between a legal practitioner and their clients. Week 5 looks at the relationship in general terms. The first video provides an overview, and then we talk about the legal practitioner's duty to provide the client with clear and timely advice. And then finally, we talk about the legal practitioner's responsibility to act only within the instructions of their client. In week 6, we talk about legal professional privilege, or the duty of confidentiality that we owe to our clients. The first video in week 6 outlines this duty in general terms, and then in the second video we look at some of the practicalities of observing the duty in some more tricky real-life situations. Finally, we look at the range of circumstances in which a practitioner is released from the duty of confidentiality. Under what circumstances are you allowed to, or even required to, divulge confidential client information? In week 7, we hone in on the issue of conflict of interest. Conflicts of interest must be avoided by legal practitioners. In the first video, we look at basic concepts around conflict of interest. In the second video, we look at the difficulties that can arise if one law firm is representing two parties concurrently, and we look at the circumstances in which this is sometimes permitted. In the third video, we look at ethical problems that arise when a practitioner acts against a former client, and then finally we look at the conflict of interest that can arise if a practitioner is acting for friends or family. In weeks 8 and 9, we continue looking at the relationship between solicitor and client, but now we're looking very specifically at the rules when a solicitor holds a client's money in their solicitor's trust account. Now, we're not going to go into massive detail in terms of making you perform excruciating double ledger accounting exercises. I've made that choice for 3 reasons. First, the Priestley 11 doesn't require it. Second, as a graduate solicitor on a restricted practicing certificate, I can guarantee no firm is going to let you tinker with the trust account. And finally, when you do get to the point of becoming a principal practitioner, you're going to have to do the Principal Practitioner's Certificate course, which involves a heap of trust accounting. What we are going to do in this course over 2 weeks is introduce you to basic concepts. So the first video in week 8 looks at the nature of a client service agreement and the lawful basis on which firms can charge clients money. In the second video, we distinguish trust money, which belongs to the client, from office money, which belongs to the firm. And we look at how trust money can become office money. Finally, in the third video, we look at the need for the utmost integrity in handling client money, and we look at some cases in which this has gone terribly wrong. Then in week 9, we look at different types of trust money, what they mean and how they need to be handled. So we look at general trust funds in the first video, controlled money and transit money in the second video, and in the third video, we look at power money, written direction money, and investment money. In week 10, we move away from talking about the solicitor-client relationship and look at the ethical dimensions of a solicitor's relationship with other practitioners. We look at the requirement to treat other solicitors with courtesy. We look at the rule which says that you're not allowed to take advantage of clear errors that have been made by another solicitor. And then, digging deeper into that idea in the third video, we look at the rule that says you're not allowed to take advantage of an inadvertent disclosure made by another solicitor. Now, to this point, I've really only been talking about solicitors. In week 11, we push this out a bit and talk about the ethical rules for advocacy in court. These rules apply to barristers and also to solicitors, particularly those who practice as solicitor advocates. In the first video, we look generally at proper conduct by an advocate in court, including some of the ethical and courtesy customs that you'll encounter in court appearances. In the second video, we'll look at the ethical duty of an advocate to bring an independent forensic mind to any proceeding in which they appear. In the third video, we look at the responsible use of court procedures by advocates, including the need for responsible and ethical cross-examination of witnesses. In the fourth video, we keep talking about witnesses, but our focus is on preparing witnesses for court and communicating with them while they're under cross-examination. And then in the fifth and final video for week 11, we look at the particular duties of prosecutors in criminal matters. In the final week of primary content, week 12, we look at the system of discipline. We start in video 1 by looking at what's called professional misconduct and how that's dealt with. This is the really bad stuff. In the second video, we look at unsatisfactory professional conduct and how that's dealt with. Unsatisfactory conduct is still, well, unsatisfactory, but it's not at the same level as professional misconduct. In the third video, we'll look at the sorts of consequences that can arise from a finding that somebody has engaged in either professional misconduct or unsatisfactory professional conduct. And then in the final video for week 12, which is also the final video for the course, we look back at the key concept running right through this course, that ethics are vitally significant and that they live at the heart of our profession. So that's the material. Of course, the big question on the mind of every student is how we're going to assess that material. This course has 4 separate assessment items. In week 4, we have a quiz worth 15% of your overall grade. This quiz covers the first 3 weeks of material, looking at the general concept of ethics, key rules and institutions, and the process of admission. Second, at the end of week 7, you'll have a problem-style essay due, which looks at the relationship between solicitor and client. This is worth 20%. Third, in week 10, you'll have a quiz on trust accounting. That's the materials from weeks 8 and 9. This quiz will be 15 questions, worth 15%. Finally, at the end of the term, we have a face-to-face sit-down exam worth the final 50%. So there you go. That's not so bad, is it? This stuff really is important. We're going to try really hard to make it interesting. And at the end of the process, well, you've got another Priestley out of the way. That's all we've got for this week. In the videos this week, we've looked at the idea of what a profession actually is and the fact that committing to ethical standards is actually part of being in a profession. We've asked what ethics actually are, and we've looked at everything we're going to study in the future weeks. Next week, we're going to look at the formal ethical rules that govern the legal profession and institutions that help us to implement those ethical rules and to give a swift kick up the bum to anyone who fails in their ethical duties. For now, you've survived week 1. I'll see you next week.